Hey everyone, it's Colin Drum, and I'm back with another video. So this time we're going to be talking about Mediterranean monetary theory. Specifically, I'm going to be taking a look at Mark 11, which is the scene where Jesus casts the money changers out of the temple. And we're going to kind of take a monetary history perspective on this and see if we can kind of figure out what's going on. I'm really excited to share with you what I found out about this. I've been working on this for about a week and a half, I think, something like that. It's something I've been meaning to look into for a while. And this material is eventually gonna make it into a book. So as you may know, my dissertation / first book is called The Difference That Money Makes. And in that book, most of the history that I cover is English monetary history in the early modern and medieval periods. And in the last chapter, I kind of cast a quick glance back to the Mediterranean, but I kind of ran out of time when I was writing that. And there's a lot more research about ancient Mediterranean than made it into the dissertation, because it wasn't really necessary to make the point that I wanted to make there. But there's going to be another book, and so my follow-up to this to the dissertation is going to be a book called An Imperial Par, and it's going to be basically kind of the story of in some ways the rise and fall of the Roman Empire and the Roman Empire's monetary system, which is the foundation for not only later European monetary systems, but also for Islamic monetary systems. So the Roman Empire is the ancestor of the monetary systems of a big chunk of the world, at least. So this is going to be eventually in there, but that's going to take me another 5 years at least to figure out everything out about that. So I just wanted to share some of this with you now, because I think it's pretty exciting. So the reason that I'm looking into this week is because of something that somebody said on Twitter. A guy named Chaim Brody, who's a Judaic studies scholar, was talking about asking his students in class, what do you think? What's going on with the money changers at the temple? And of course, I was like, I bet I can figure something out about this. So this is kind of my attempt at an answer. What is going on in Mark 11? So let's start. Let's just start by looking at Mark 11. So I do the scene with the money changers is in the middle of the chapter, but I want us to consider the whole chapter, because there's a story about a fig tree that frames the story of the money changers. And as I'm going to try to show you, I think all this stuff matters. Okay, so bear with me, and I'm going to read this. This is Mark 11. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it, and will send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying that colt?" They told them what Jesus has said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Okay, so the first scene is Jesus comes and he requisitions a colt. This is going to be, I'm going to comment on that in a minute. And he enters Jerusalem. And he goes and scopes out the temple. But then it's late, so he leaves. And so in the next scene, we have this fig tree. Right. So on the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see whether people would find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. Okay. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Huh? So it's a bit of an overreaction from Jesus. It's not fig season, but Jesus is cursing the fig tree for not giving him figs during a time when it's not fig season. So everybody, okay, what is going on? So then they came to Jerusalem. As he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves, and he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." Okay? This is a reference to Isaiah. And when the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him, because the whole crowd was spellbound by his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. So now they returned to the fig tree. In the morning, as they passed by, they saw a fig tree withered away to its roots. Then Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if you say to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and if you do not doubt in your heart, but believe what you say will come to pass, it will be done for you. So I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father in heaven may also forgive your trespasses." Okay, now the end. So they returned to Jerusalem. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders came to him and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority to do them?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin? Answer me." They argued with one another, for if we say from heaven, he will say, "Why then did you not believe him?" But we shall say, shall we say of human origin? They were afraid of the crowd, for all regarded John as truly a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things." Okay, so I want to begin by making a comment on this word trespasses. Okay, in Greek, this is paraptoma. So it does mean false slip, a blunder, a transgression, a trespass, but it also has this meaning of an error in the amount of payments. Okay, this is going to be crucial. This is there's always monetary meanings lurking in this stuff. So this means an error in the amount of payments. So Jesus says, forgive the accounting discrepancies that others owe to you, and you will be in turn forgiven your own accounting discrepancies. That's what he says. Okay, so by the end of the video, hopefully we're gonna be able to comment on various parts of this. We're gonna make some sense out of the cloaks. We're going to make some sense out of the fig trees, and we're going to figure out exactly what's going on with the money changers and why this is an issue. So the first, you might think, you think about money changers, and then you kind of think about like debt and banks and usury and stuff like that. But that is actually going to be that's going to send us on the wrong track. Okay, so we need to get clear about exactly what it is that the money changers are doing, because while it's not impossible that people called money changers could be making loans, could be engaged in dealing in credit. Okay, in fact, the word for banker originally the etymology of the word banker comes from the word for the table that the money changers sit at with their scales. But money changers don't necessarily need to be dealing in credit. Okay, we would be a bit confused if we assume this. They can, in fact, literally just be changing coins, changing one coin into another, and that's what we're going to be concerned with here. But in order to fully understand all of this and place it in its context, I'm going to need to teach you kind of three different things. So first of all, we're going to need to look at the coins a little bit and understand at a kind of literal level what the monetary environment is that we're dealing with here in the early first century AD. And we're going to need to learn a little political history of the Hazmanans and Herodian dynasties, so political history of Syria. So I'm going to refer to this whole region here as Syria, because that's kind of what the Romans called it in this period. So there's different names, right? There's Palestine, there's Syria, there's Israel, maybe there's Judea. There's all these different names. We're not going to worry too much about it. I'm just going to refer to all of this generally as Syria. So we're talking about southern Syria here. And so we're going to need to learn a little bit about the political history of southern Syria and the region around Jerusalem. And we're also going to need to think a little bit about Roman history, because all of this has very much to do with Rome and with the monetary influence of Rome. Okay, so I think the easiest place to begin, well, before we begin, I want to comment just briefly on something that I've addressed in my previous videos a little bit. So if you go back and look at the medieval monetary history #2 video, where I talk about the mint, I'm going to kind of assume a little bit of that knowledge in this video. It'll be helpful. But you know, there's anywhere you look in monetary history, you'll probably find a debate that is about intrinsic versus fiduciary value. Okay, and so you'll have one scholar arguing that the intrinsic value is really what matters, and you'll have somebody else arguing that the fiduciary value is really what matters. And what this means is the legal value of the coin. Okay. You'll find some version of this debate in a lot of the literature. This debate is going on in the Roman monetary history currently, where the debate kind of focuses more on Republican coinage. So we're looking at early imperial coinage mostly. So we might address that actual debate in its details in another video. But the basic thing that I want you to keep in mind, okay, is actually, you know, so we can actually resolve this debate in a very happy way, which is that they're both right? Stop arguing. You're both right. Both the intrinsic and the fiduciary value of the coin matters. We need to consider both of these things both at once. So the metal matters, but the metal doesn't explain everything. Okay, the monetary system is not it's not this gold bug fantasy of the commodity serving as a perfect equilibrium yardstick of value or whatever. Okay, there's metal in the coin, and that matters. So part of some of the coins we're going to be talking about are bronze coins, which means they're a copper alloy. But even in this is small change. But even these coins are not really tokens in the sense of being intrinsically worthless, like paper is. No, it's got copper in it. You can melt it down and you can make stuff out of copper. Okay, copper is an important industrial material. So it's useful. So if you collect enough coins, you can go make some stuff out of it, and that's useful. So even the small changes is worth something as metal. But this doesn't mean that its value as metal explains everything there is to say about what it is as money, because it also, well, it's got a stamp on it, which in Greek is a character. Okay, it has a character, which means a stamp, and this stamp gives it a legal encoding as a piece of nominal money. And what we're going to have to try to understand, if we're going to understand what's going on, is that both of these things matter all the time. So none of the coins that we're thinking about are pure tokens, but also none of them have a value that is strictly identical to the intrinsic value. So we're going to get in more detail about that in just a second. So okay, so what's the best way to try to understand what's going on at Mark 11? What's the deal with the money changers? Why are they an issue? So I want to begin by considering the reception context of Mark of the Gospels, right? So Mark, I think is composed in late 1st century AD. I'm not so much of an expert on the Bible history stuff. I think it's late 60s, 70s, something like that. Maybe 80s. I'm not sure. Somebody can say in the comments. But we have to remember, right, that Christianity is the religion that it is because of things that happened later. So these are being received in a later context. So I want to think about kind of the early reception context of Mark 11 in the 2nd century AD, which is so after the destruction of the temple. So we have to remember, it's very important to remember that Jesus is crucified sometime in the early 30s AD. 33 AD is one of the possibilities, and for reasons that you'll see that if it were true that the crucifixion occurred in 33 AD, that would be very convenient for the story that I want to tell. But the temple is not destroyed until 70, and even more than that, what we're really thinking about when we think about early Christianity is kind of the 2nd century AD. So we're thinking about this reception context. Now, if you are in the 2nd century AD, you're receiving the Gospel of Mark, you're early Christian, and what do these stories in the Gospels about monetary politics, what do they mean to you? Well, the place we should begin is by asking, what coins are you using? If you're in Syria, you're Palestine, Judea, in the 2nd century AD, what coins are you using? Well, there's going to be 2 major coins that you're going to use a lot. These are going to be the denarius of Nero, and somewhat surprisingly, the Legionary Denarius of Mark Antony, which by this point, these coins are about 200 years old. Okay, so they've been circulating for a couple of centuries, and they're getting a little worn. Okay, so you have these Nero coins are a little newer, but they're also debased, right? Nero, obviously, we still have today, he has a bad reputation, right? He's bad. Why is he bad? Well, because his coins are bad. That's at least one big reason that he's bad. So you have your coins that you have are kind of bad coins. You have these old Antony coins, and you have these Nero coins. Now, Antony's coins are minted in the 1st century BC, into the 1st century, last third of the 1st century BC. And Nero's coins, the ones that we care about, are minted after 66. So from 66 until Nero is deposed in a few years later. So now there's 100 years in between Antony's coins and Nero's coins, and other coins were minted then. Let's look at these coins. Okay, but the other coins that were minted then are not circulating. So the coins that you in the 2nd century AD are going to care most about is this coin, the denarius of Nero, and I'll walk you through what all these numbers mean in just a second, is that, and this coin, the denarius of Antony. Now, there are other Roman coins that were minted in between them, notably the coins of Augustus, and also coins that might have been minted under Augustus's successors, Tiberius, Caligula, and Claudius, who are the other emperors. Now, they're not on here because they are mostly minting coins according to the standard of Augustus. So those are all Augustus standard denarius. Now, these coins mostly didn't survive to the 2nd century AD. Why? Well, because they're good coins. They're better coins. So you may have heard of Gresham's law, which states that bad money drives out good. Now, there's some detail, it's sort of a rule of thumb. Let's put an asterisk next to Gresham's law, but certainly sometimes it holds true, and here it did, right? So the denarii of Augustus had more silver in them than the denarii of either Antony or Nero, and so those are the denarii that would tend to be melted down, exported. So the Roman Empire is importing things from outside, and it needs silver to pay for them, like from India, from the Indian Ocean system in particular. And so these coins, because they have more silver, are going to be more likely to be withdrawn from circulation, and so they don't really survive, right? So despite the fact that the Antony coins are very old, they actually survive longer than the Augustus coins, and we'll look at this. We'll find out more about this. Okay, so now, what is the way to think about this? So the place to begin is really that we're going to have to think about the 2nd century BC, which is really kind of where we need to begin our story. And we'll come back to these coins in a second. So 2nd century BC, there's kind of a power shakeup happening in the Mediterranean. Okay, so kind of from the time of the conquest of Alexander, you have the Hellenistic period as it's known. So you have the Seleucids control Syria and Iran and other places. There's the Ptolemies who are in Egypt. Both of these are kingdoms, dynasties that were founded by Alexander's generals. And also there's the Carthaginians further west, who are Phoenicians, and they're kind of if not exactly allied, they're kind of in the club of, let's say, the 3rd century power structure. Now, what happens in the 2nd century is that there's kind of a shakeup, which is really associated with the rise of Rome. So there's the Punic Wars. So the Second Punic War, which is kind of the most famous one at the beginning of the 2nd century, and there's a 3rd Punic War in the middle. And it's really in the 2nd century, after the Second Punic War, that the Roman economy really monetizes, and we might look at that more in another video. So they're basically the Romans are building big fleets and throwing them away. They build like 3 different fleets in rapid succession in their war against the Carthaginians. And one kind of constant in the history of coinage is that you're always going to see naval buildups associated with growth in the monetary economy. They kind of go together. You have to pay the rowers, you have to finance the construction of the ships, and after you have naval hegemony, you have to have monetary relations with places that are overseas, and coinage kind of facilitates all of these different things. So we have the monetization of Rome and the rise of Rome as a power player in the Mediterranean, kind of beginning with the Second Punic War and kind of sealing the deal after the Third Punic War. And a little bit before the Third Punic War, we also have the revolt of the Maccabees, which founds the Hazmanans dynasty in southern Syria, and so they're revolting from the Seleucids. So the Seleucid dynasty, which is the Hellenistic kingdom, and they are also minting bronze coins. Okay, there are no silver coins, at least none that survive. I think they probably never were minted. So they're minting bronze coins, and this is all basically as part of their funding the military activity that accompanies the sort of breakup of the 3rd century interstate system and the rise of these new powers. Okay, so that's the 2nd century, and so this, the Hazmanans found a dynasty that lasts for a little over 100 years. Now, let's fast forward a little bit to the 1st century BC. So what's happening in Rome? Well, of course, we can add Julius Caesar. So there's the rise of Caesar. There's the civil war between various people, including Antony and Octavian, after Julius Caesar, and we also kind of a little bit, we had sort of during this time, a little bit after it, there's the Herod. So let's see. So this history is probably more familiar to you. I'm kind of going to assume kind of about this, right? There's Julius Caesar. It all ends in a civil war, and Antony really has a power base in the east. This is going to be important for our story, okay? And Antony has the east, and Octavian has the west, and they duke it out, and Octavian wins, and he becomes Augustus, the first quote unquote emperor of Rome. Now, we need to talk a little bit about Herod. So in order to do that, it will help if we look at the map here. So the Hazmanans, after the Maccabean Revolt, so they've developed this fiscal system, this coinage system that they use to win independence from the Seleucids, and so they have kind of a de-Hellenizing ideology, right? So they are trying to assert the pure Judaism against its sort of Hellenistic corruption that happens after the conquests of Alexander, and it's so they're building this big fiscal center in Jerusalem around the temple complex, and they're also they are forcibly converting people to Judaism, by which I mean the religion of the region of Judah. Now, the reason that I'm emphasizing this Judaism is because Judaism in this period is not the only version of the Moses religion, okay? And importantly, there's also the Samaritans. who play an important part in the story. So the Samaritans are not they are not part of Judaism, but they are part of the religion of Moses. There's still some Samaritans who exist today. Not very many of them, but there's some communities still in southern Syria of the Samaritans, and their religion is sort of like what we call Judaism, except that their entire Bible is just the Pentateuch. It's just the first 5 books of Moses. So they don't have the rest of it. They don't have the prophets and the history books that are part of what we call the Hebrew Bible. And their Pentateuch has some slight differences. There's a number of orthographical differences, of spelling differences, but also most importantly, they have a different mountain. Okay, so in the when Moses receives the law, he's also commanded to build a temple on a mountain. I think it's called Gezerah. It's somewhere. It's kind of a little bit north of Jerusalem. Okay, so this is, another version of the Moses religion that just has a slightly different place that it considers the center of things. And so part of what the Hazmanans do as they're trying to kind of standardize the Moses religion around themselves, right? And so they're trying to prohibit, they're trying to shut down the other cultic centers of the Moses religion, of which one of them is this Mount Gezerah in the north. So they basically they actually go and they make a punitive military expedition, and they tear down the temple that the Samaritans have on their mountain, and they say, our temple in Jerusalem is the only real temple. You have to come sacrifice here, and in order to sacrifice, you have to pay the temple tax, which is a half shekel per person. Okay, so it would be a full shekel for a married couple to come sacrifice, and you come and you buy a pair of doves and you sacrifice them, and that's your obligation. So we're going to talk much more about the shekel and the temple tax in just a second. So the Hazmanans, right, they're trying to centralize the fiscal administration around Jerusalem, and in doing so, they're kind of becoming a little regional hegemon, and they're forcibly converting people to Judaism. Obviously, this is going to arouse some resentments that the Samaritans aren't going to forget that they got their temple burned down. But it's also important because they convert these people down here, the land of Edom, as it's called in the Bible. And this is where Herod comes from. So Herod comes from down here. He's a convert who's become a Judaist as part of this Hazmonaean program. And there's a war of succession in the Hazmonaean dynasty, and Herod basically rises to power here. I think probably with some help from Rome, the new kind of bad boys on the block in the Mediterranean. And Herod kind of really sets up a very dynamic fiscal system, right? He has this big building program. So he's employing a lot of people, carpenters, for instance, okay, to do labor as part of his building program. He's expanding the temple complex, and he's also building a port down here at Caesarea. So Caesarea is here. Obviously, it's called Caesarea, so it's named after Caesar. So Herod is kind of he's kind of a Romanizing ruler. And Caesarea is basically a pagan city. It has a circus, I think, or not a circus, but at least an amphitheater and all these other kinds of pagan rather than Hebrew cultural institutions and all of this stuff. And so not all of the regions that Herod rules are Judaist. Now, Herod dies in about 6 AD, and his kingdom is divided up into a tetrarchy, a series of 4 that later gets consolidated to 3. Okay, so there's a territorial breakup of Herod's kingdom, all of which kind of subject to Rome. So basically all of Herod's heirs are kind of Roman puppets, and they're kind of governing through them. But the important thing, and this will become important to our story, right, is that we have this kind of centralizing fiscal system under the Hazmanans that is kind of intensified under Herod, that then gets split up after the death of Herod into a few different zones. Okay, so now what about the temple tax? So an important component of our story is that the Hazmanans and Herod do not mint silver coins. All right, they are not minting silver coins. They are minting bronze coins. They are using these bronze coins as a monetary instrument in their fiscal system. So they're using them in order to organize labor and supplies and stuff for their military operations and their building projects. But these bronze coins are not going to be very useful for dealing with merchants and international trade. Okay, in order to do international trade, you are going to need some silver, because the merchants, well, first of all, bronze is very bulky. They don't really want to carry it around all the time for their money. And second of all, these bronze coins are going to be highly overvalued. So they're going to derive a lot of their value from their legal tender status, their nominal value. And so the merchants, they're not subject to Herod, and so they don't really want that. They want silver. So where is the silver coming from? Well, the dominant silver coin in the region before 66 AD is the Tyrion shekel. So here's a city called Tyre. It's a Phoenician city, and it mints a silver coin called the Tyrion shekel. And this is the coin that you probably had to pay the temple tax in. Now, probably not necessarily. There probably might have been some other, you could bring in silver, and as long as you have enough silver, that's the right one. But the Tyrion shekel is the good coin, and if you get that one, it'll be accepted. And so that's going to at least be the most common coin that the temple payments are going to have to be made in. So let's look at that coin. So here's the Tyrion shekel. Now, it is a coin, and you can look at the, people have weighed these coins. It weighs about 14.28 grams. Now, I was really excited to discover this when I first started looking into this, because 14.28 grams is the same weight as the weight of the earliest coins ever, which are these electrum statars of Lydia, which also weighed 14.28 grams. I'm not going to get too much into that in this video, but so I'm going to call this the Phoenician shekel. We can kind of put an asterisk on it. There's different things we might call the Phoenician shekel, but this is a measure that was probably in use since about the 6th century BC, sometime around then, right? At least. And so basically, so everybody's measured. This is a very standard unit. Now, what is it? Well, I think, and some of what I have here is a guess. Basically, my methodology for constructing this is I make a bunch of guesses, and then I go dig up some data, and I see if the data contradicts my guesses, and if it does, then I revise it. So I reserve the right to be wrong about some of what is on this spreadsheet, but my current model says that this shekel, which we measure as 14.28 grams, is actually 310 wheat grains. Okay, so there's a wheat grain, it's about 46 milligrams, and this is the unit that they use, and it's 310 of those. Now, the Tyrion shekel, we can measure the fineness, and the fineness is about 97%. It's really consistent. It's about 97% silver. So my hypothesis for what this is really, for the way that they would have thought about this, is that the shekel has a purity of 30/31. So you could easily make this, right? So say you took 300 grains of silver and you added to it 10 grains of base metal, and then you minted it into this coin. Well, then you would have a coin that weighed 310 grains and that contained 300 grains of silver, which is right at about 97%, which is what we observe. So this is a very pure silver coin. This is about as pure as it gets when it comes to silver coins. Okay, and so now, why does the temple in Jerusalem want this coin? Well, they want this coin because it's pure silver, and because what they care about is really the foreign exchange value of the receipts from the temple tax. Okay, they care about having a big hoard of silver, which they can use for foreign exchange when they need it, right? To get luxury imports, but also to get it's you know, if you're at war and you need supplies from foreign merchants, the foreign merchants do not want to take your IOUs in payment because maybe you'll lose the war and then you won't pay them. So foreign merchants don't like to do business on credit to belligerent parties. They want hard money. So that's what the temple really cares about is the foreign exchange value of the receipts, and so that's why they want to get paid in this Tyrion Shuttle. Like which I say is contains about 13.82 grams of silver. Now, okay, so the next thing we want to think about, so keep all that in mind, try not to forget it. We'll come back to it. We got a bunch of puzzle pieces and we got to pick them all up and then we'll put them together at the end. So the next puzzle piece that I want to talk about a little bit is Antony and Octavian and the Civil War at the end of the 1st century BC. So like I said, right, so Octavian has the West and Antony has the East. So basically the Roman Empire kind of fractures right into these two power blocks, and Antony has the East, Octavian has the West, and they're at war. And Antony, in order to finance his military activity, issues a bunch of different coins that are called Legionary Denarii, or they're called the Denarii with the ships on them, right? So the ship-bearing Denarii, because they all have pictures of ships on them. Now, what is interesting about this coin is that it is not exactly a denarius. Okay, it's kind of, from the perspective of the Roman system, it's sort of a bad coin. So let's take a look at that. So this is my guess. I think this is right. It might not be exactly right. This is my guess. This is what I think the denarius is under Julius Caesar. Okay, so to begin thinking about this, we need to first think about the Roman pound. So the Roman pound is 1,728 of siliqui. So the siliqua is a carat measure. It's the carat comes from the carob tree. So it is a measure based on the fruit of the carob tree. And there's some different carats. The siliqua is not exactly what we call a carat today. It's a little different. It's my guess for what it is about 189.5 milligrams. So we know the Roman pound is about 327 grams, but it's more important to know how they counted it. Is 1728 siliqui, which is 12 to the third power, right? So it's 12 ounces of 144 siliqui each. So you can see how this is a nice number, right? It looks, if you're used to base 10, this looks like a weird number, but it's actually a perfectly good number. It's 2 to the 6 times 3 to the third. So you can divide it into a lot of convenient fractions. Now, Julius Caesar introduces a gold coin. We're not going to talk about that right now. That would be an additional piece of the puzzle. We're really mainly interested in the interface between silver and bronze for this discussion. So he also has this denarius. Now, here in order to kind of describe the coin, and this is not a description of every empirical coin, but it's a description of the standard. This is a theoretical coin. This is what it's supposed to be. It differs a little bit in practice. It's a little too, we won't get into that. There's a characteristic distribution of how the coins look. So I've given the description of this coin in terms of 3 different numbers. The first number is lightness. Okay, so this number is just a number that's subtracted from the pound right at the beginning, right? So say you're a moneyer, you want to make a denarius. What's the first thing you do? Well, you take a pound of silver, 1728 siliqui, and you remove 128 siliqui. Now, so that's part of the profit of the mint, and that this probably goes to the state, would be my guess. But I'm not sure exactly about this. So what are we left with? Well, now we remove 128, so we have 1600 siliqui. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those 1600 siliqui and we're going to cut them first to a fineness of 39/40. So we're going to remove an additional 80 from them and replace it with base metal. And then we're going to cut that amount of metal into 80 pieces. Cut per pound. Okay, so if we know the lightness, cut per pound, and the fineness of the coins, we can know everything we want to know about the coin. So what do we have here? Well, we have a denarius that weighs 20 siliqui, okay, which is about 3.79 grams, but it doesn't contain 20 siliqui of silver. It contains 19.5 siliqui of silver. Okay, and part of what I'm arguing is that this would have been known by dealers in money in the period, right? They know this is supposed to be the content. Now, this is a small discrepancy, but it's a very pure coin. Okay, this is a very pure coin. Now, so this would be the reference coin. So now let's look at the denarius of Antony. Now, Antony debased his silver coins. Okay, so they have the same lightness and cut, which means that they're going to weigh about the same. The existing specimens are going to be lighter than this if you go look on the auction sites or the catalogs, but you got to remember that these coins circulated for like 200 years, so they're worn, and we'll get there in a second. Okay, but where the heaviest ones are around here, around 379, which is this 20 siliqui. Now, but they're less pure. They are, I think, about 37/40 fine, which means that they would contain 18.5 siliqui of silver. Okay, now, what is the significance of this? Well, for one thing, right, Antony is at war. Okay, he's fighting Octavian, and it's not uncommon to see debasements of coinage in times of war because you're at war, you need money. And so it makes a lot of sense to add some cheap metal to the expensive metal to make it stretch further. Okay, but there's a little bit more going on here than that. And in order to fully appreciate this, we need to remember Antony has a power base in the east, and he's attacking the west from there. Okay, now it just so happens that 4 Legionary Denarii of Antony, if my model is correct, contain about 304.42 wheat grains of silver. Okay, so here's the siliqui. This is how Romans count weight. Here's this wheat grain. This is how the Levant counts weight. Okay, and remember the Tyrion Shuttle is 310 wheat grains heavy and contains 300 wheat grains of silver. So 4 of these together contain 304.42, which is right in the middle of this spread. Yeah, so that's important because basically what Antony is saying is my denarii are quarter shekels. Okay, 4 of these makes a shekel, and look, my shekel of 4 denarii, or we might call it a tetradrachm, but we're not going to worry about that, has actually a little bit more silver than your good coin, the Tyrion Shuttle. So from the perspective of Antony's power base in the east, if his denarius is the equivalent of 1/4 of a shekel, then it's quite a good coin. You actually are getting a premium in silver for using Antony's money. Okay, but from the perspective of the West, from the perspective of the denarius, this is actually a bad denarius. Okay, so denarii, because it has less silver in it than the Caesar denarii do. Okay, so The Legionary Denarius, which is a coin that was minted to pay soldiers in Antony's power base in the east, is a good shekel, but a bad denarius. A good quarter shekel, we should say, but a bad denarius. Okay, so that makes sense, right? Because what is he doing? He's, from the perspective of the east, he's saying, look, my money is good, right? I mean, I'm a good ruler. You can trust me. Here's the money. From the perspective of the Roman system, this is a hostile attack on the Roman monetary system, because if these coins circulate and drive out the good money in the West, then basically Antony is getting a free ride at the expense of the Western monetary system. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So Antony issues a lot of these coins, and there's different ones. They have numerals for the legions on them, so each legion kind of has its own coin. It'd be interesting to look at the differences between them. So here I'm surely glossing over some complexity about the actual distributions of the coins, but and these coins continue to circulate, like I said, for 200 years. Okay. So now let us think about the political situation in southern Syria, Palestine, Judea, in the 1st century. Okay, so again, hold on to everything I've said. We're going to put it all together at the end. So as I said, right, Herod dies sometime around 6 AD, and his kingdom is split up into 4 and then 3 parts. So the important thing to think about here is that the division of the kingdom is also a division of the monetary space. So now each of the Herodians, the successors to Herod, are going to be minting their own bronze coins. Now, these bronze coins are, here's the grain of truth in the chartless story. Okay, so Herod is imposing a lot of different taxes, like tolls and other kinds of taxes, and he takes his own coins back for the payment of these taxes. Okay, so Herod is taxing and spending in bronze coins, but what really matters is not just the fact that you can use the bronze coins to pay taxes. What matters is that you might need to buy silver coins with them. So here, maybe now you're beginning to get a glimmer of the money changers. Okay, so Herod is not guaranteeing the value of his bronze coins against silver. Okay, that is going to float. That is really important. All right, so he is saying, yeah, these are my coins. I will accept them back for me. But Herod's not the only person you need to pay. You also might need to pay the temple, and you also might need to buy things from foreign merchants, from imports of grain, for instance. Okay, and when the merchants are setting the price of grain, what they care about is silver prices, not bronze prices, and because silver is what they have to pay to get the grain from where they're sourcing it. So and Herod is not, he hasn't pegged his coin to silver. Okay, so now what happens after Herod dies and his kingdom is divided? Well, now instead of one fiduciary coin, Herod's coin, we have 3 different ones. Okay, so that's going to be important. Now, we also need to think a little bit about political divisions around the Temple of Jerusalem. So the Samaritans. We talked about those. So the Samaritans, importantly, so we already talked about how they have slightly different. They have just the Torah, but they're also kind of around this region around Caesarea, which is this Roman port. Okay, now the Samaritans are going to be the major ethnic group that are serving in the Roman auxiliary unit guarding Caesarea. Okay, so the Roman military structure kind of has 2 tiers. There's the legions, who are the regular troops, but there's also irregular troops, the auxiliaries, who are paid in Roman money and who are kind of the local garrison. Okay, so the Samaritans up around here are the Roman auxiliaries. They're the cops. They're Rome's cops in the region, and they're getting paid in Roman money. That's going to matter. So we already know about them. You've probably also heard of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So we're going to talk, I'll explain them, but I want to add to that a group of people that I'm calling the Baptists, that we might call the Christians. I'm calling them Baptists because it doesn't make much sense to talk about Jesus as being a Christian, but I also, I think it's a little misleading to say that Jesus was a Jew, because what we think of as Judaism is really is rabbinic Judaism, which is a successor of the Pharisees. So what is this division between Pharisees, Sadducees, and the I don't know, maybe I'm saying that wrong. Sadducees, I don't know. And these people I'm calling the Baptists, or the followers of John the Baptist. So this would include Jesus and his followers in the Jesus movement. So what's the basic difference between these? Well, there's kind of some social divisions, right? In Josephus, the Roman, the Jewish historian, Hebrew historian writing in Rome, he kind of identifies the Sadducees with the upper class, kind of the temple establishment, and the Pharisees are kind of a more middling party. This is not really a hard and fast rule. There's also Pharisees, members of the Pharisee party, who are part of the temple administration. But the best way to distinguish these three different groups is that they take different positions on the relative value of oral versus written law. Okay, so the Sadducees, who are kind of this is kind of the Hazmanans establishment, is maybe one way to think about it. Their position is that only the text matters. Okay, so they are different from what we call Judaism for this reason, because there is in modern Judaism what's called the Oral Torah, which is a whole additional set of teachings in the Mishnah and the Talmud and those kind of things. And so the Sadducees say no oral Torah, just the written Torah. And that makes sense if you're kind of the temple establishment, because if your power grows from the fact that you're the one who's entitled to read the text, then the text is important. The Pharisees differ because they as the ancestors of modern Judaism, they're the ones who assert the importance of the oral Torah. And what's interesting is that the Baptists kind of take the even more extreme position where they really privilege the oral teaching, okay, above the written teaching. I mean, this is sort of the core of Jesus's teaching with regards to the law, which is that the law is sort of a vessel for the truth, and you don't want to confuse the vessel for what it contains. Okay, so the written law is not so important. It's a vessel, and what really matters is the logos. Anyway, okay, so we have first of all, so we have some ethnic divisions around sort of the Samaritans as the collaborators of the Roman occupation in a certain kind of way, and we also have some of these social divisions, basically based around different ideas about the value of the law, with consequences about the importance of the temple administration. Okay, so now let's see. We need to put, let's look at one more puzzle piece, and then we'll try to put it all together. Last puzzle piece. Let's think about 1st century AD Roman history. So we need to kind of begin with Augustus, and then we'll talk about Tiberius, and then we'll talk about Nero. And there's other emperors in there in the middle, but these are the ones who matter. So Augustus, of course, defeats, is Octavian, same guy. He defeats Antony. He unifies the empire, and he reforms the coinage. He sets up this standard that I've characterized here. We don't need to worry too much about the details of it. But the important thing to kind of understand about Augustus is that Augustus is a very vigorous ruler, and he's spending and taxing a lot of money. Okay, so we have an expansionary fiscal system, and well, this matters because if the state doesn't spend a lot of money, then, as the MMT people are always pointing out to us, then the private sector won't have any money, right? So suppose that the state is running a surplus, that it's taxing more money than it spends every year. Well, what happens to that money? Well, it's going to sit in the treasury, and if money is sitting in the treasury, then nobody has it, and so money is going to become correspondingly more scarce for what we now call the private sector. And this is what happens in the transition between Augustus and Tiberius. So Tiberius succeeds Augustus, and Tiberius, whether for personal reasons or for reasons of factional politics, basically embarks on an austerity program. So he cuts the budgets, and he starts running a surplus, and he starts hoarding all of the money. Now, what's the consequence of this? Well, the consequence of this is that it creates a debt crisis. Because if there's not enough money, not enough cash in the economy, well, what has to happen? Well, either the economy has to contract, there's less monetary transactions, or these transactions have to be done on credit. So you can use credit money instead of cash. And so with the government sector in contraction, you get a problem of debts. And this is what happens leading up to the monetary crisis of 33 AD, right? So what I want us to, now we're going to begin putting the puzzle pieces together by connecting these events, okay? So if 33 is the year of the crucifixion, it's a big coincidence that it happens in exactly the same year as there is a financial crash, a crash of the credit economy at Rome. And so I'm going to talk about the connection there. So let's look at Tacitus. This is Tacitus 6:16 and 17. Okay. Meanwhile, a powerful host of accusers fell with sudden fury on the class which systematically increased its wealth by usury in defiance of a law passed by Caesar the dictator, defining the terms of lending money and of holding estates in Italy, a law long obsolete because the public good is sacrificed to private interests. The curse of usury was indeed of old standing in Rome, and a most frequent cause of sedition and discord, and it was therefore repressed even in the early days of a less corrupt morality. First, the 12 tables prohibited anyone from exacting more than 10%, and previously it had depended on the caprice of the wealthy. So then there's a bill that reduces interest to half that amount, and finally, compound interest was wholly forbidden. So this is in maybe the late 20s or the early 30s. A check too was put by several enactments of the people on evasions, so on and so forth. Okay, so basically, so there's a crisis of indebtedness, and they passed legislation limiting the rate of interest. What happens? Well, hence follows a scarcity of money, a great shock being given to all credit. The current coin, too, in consequence of the conviction of so many persons and the sale of their property being locked up in the imperial treasury or the public exchequer. To meet this, the Senate had directed that every creditor should have 2/3 of his capital secured on estates in Italy. Creditors, however, were suing for payment in full. So at first, so on and so forth. And then the very device intended as remedy, the sale and purchase of estates, proved the contrary, as the usurers had hoarded up all their money for buying land. The facilities for selling were followed by a fall in prices, and the deeper a man was in debt, the more reluctantly did he part with his property, and many were utterly ruined. Now, what happens? The destruction of private wealth precipitated the fall in rank of reputation, till at last the emperor, Tiberius, imposed his aid by distributing throughout the banks 100 million sesterces. A sesterce is a unit of account. That's 1/4 of denarii. So he passes out 250 million denarii, and allowing freedom to borrow without interest for 3 years, provided the borrower gave security to the state in land to double that amount. Credit was restored. Okay, this is what happens in 33 AD. So what's happening here? Well, as I said, right, Tiberius succeeds Augustus and does austerity. Okay, he starts winding down this intense fiscal system that Augustus has mobilized. And what happens? Well, So you get so the money's being hoarded in the state treasury, and this means that monetary transactions are going to have to shift to credit. So there's more and more credit being levered up, including credit that's collateralized by land. Okay. For those of you who are familiar with French Revolution monetary history, you'll see some parallels here. So, but then, right, the debt grows. The compound interest on the debts creates a problem. And now, what happens? Well, the credit is exposed to political risk. There's the risk that that there's going to be legislation that's going to repress credit. And what happens? Well, the credit becomes risky, and so there's a run on credit. Everybody wants cash. Nobody wants credit. And what happens? Well, this leads to a deflationary shock, because all of a sudden there's no credit. And so the effect, what modern economics would call the effective money supply, is going to radically contract. This is going to suck all of the coins into hoards, because everybody needs money because nobody can pay their debt. So so this is a run on the monetary system. Okay. This is happening in Rome. And the important thing to keep in mind is that this event, where Tiberius recollateralizes the moneylenders by distributing money from the treasury, okay, this is very close to what we call quantitative easing. It's a little different because there's not a market in the secondary securities, but he's recollateralizing the banks by distributing money to them. This happens in 33, but it's at the end of this crisis that's probably been burning for a few years that is causing essentially debt deflation. So there's a collapse in prices. Money is becoming scarce. It's this credit crunch in Rome is sucking all of the coins out of the economy, and most importantly, it's sucking the silver coins out of the economy, because that's the safety asset. Okay. So now we're kind of in a position to understand what the problem is that the monetary politics in the Jesus movement are responding to. Well, the point is this, okay? Well, let's go back to Mark. And let's consider the very beginning of it. So what happened to the very beginning? Well, Jesus comes to Jerusalem and he requisitions a colt, something to ride on. And he also requisitions these cloaks, okay? These are, well, he's demanding supplies. What he's doing here is a parody of, well, Herodian and Roman military requisition or purveyances, okay? So basically, the Romans have an occupying army, and the biggest problem with having an army is, how do you supply it? You need supplies, and you don't. It's really a pain in the ass to supply your army yourself directly. There's a lot of logistics involved, and so what you do is you make it a law that the soldiers are allowed to take whatever they need, okay, from people, but you can't just plunder them because, well, they resent that. So it makes it a lot easier if you supply the soldiers with bronze coins, and they use these bronze coins in order to make forced purchases of goods and services that they require, right? So they can force you to carry their bags. They can force you to sell them your donkey or your cloak or other things like this, okay? And that's where you get the bronze money, which has value. Why? Well, because you can use it to pay taxes later, or you can trade it to somebody else who uses it to pay taxes later. Okay, so this part of the story is the chartalist. This is what's right about the MMT story, is that this does sometimes happen, right? There are coins that are like this, and that's these bronze coins. So Jesus here is kind of engaging in a parody of these, but notice that there's no money involved, right? He's saying that the Lord will send it back here immediately. So one way of interpreting the point that's being made here, right, is that Jesus is saying that it's not necessary to have money in order to mobilize resources that we have, the community of believers, if we believe in ourselves and we believe that what is returned, what is taken will be returned. There's no need for money in order to mediate these kinds of transactions, right? So he's showing, look, we can mobilize resources for ourselves. We don't actually need this monetary fiscal system in order to do that. So it's sort of a parody of this military requisition. Now, okay, so the point is that these bronze coins are entering the economy when they're spent into the economy by executive power, by Herod or by the Romans, by these by the military apparatus. And one thing you can use the money to do is to pay your taxes. Okay, fine. But another thing you might need your money to do is to buy food, other kinds of things which might be imported. And you also might need to pay the temple tax, which is not the same institution as Herod or the Romans. Okay, it's different as the temple. And both commodities in the markets that you might want to buy with your money that the soldiers gave you for taking your cult, and the temple tax are both tied to silver. So in order to buy those things, right, you might need to change your money into silver. The question is, what's the price that you can do that at, right? Because remember, Herod he's not defending this, right? That's not really his problem. That's your problem. If you want to change your bronze into silver. And so, of course, this is what the money changers are doing, right? Now, if you are getting paid in bronze, but you need to buy things that are indexed to silver, whether they're goods in the market or the temple contribution, then you need to purchase that silver essentially at a market price. And that's the market price that the money changers are making. So the problem is, of course, if in the late 20s and the 30s, what's happening at the center of the monetary system, right? So remember that Herod and the temple, they're not minting silver. That silver coin that's everything is pegged to, or everything not pegged, but it's the reference coin for the monetary system for prices, okay, is being minted entire, which is connected into to a monetary system centered on Rome. What's happening in Rome? Well, there's a crisis in the credit markets, and there's a run on cash. Everybody's hoarding cash. So what does this mean? Well, it means that silver is becoming scarce. And so the price of the silver coin in terms of the bronze coin, okay, is going to be rising, which means that the real purchasing power of the bronze coins that are being used by most people in the economy is going to be falling, and they're going to experience this as inflation. Okay, so let's notice that we have a deflationary crisis in silver, but if your money is in bronze, you would experience this as inflation because the value of your money is falling. Okay, so whether we're talking about deflation or inflation might depend on where you are in the monetary system. That's important, right? Okay, so let's add one more element to it. I'm going to talk about the fig tree in a second. So here he makes this reference to Isaiah. My house should be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. So one question is, what's the significance of this all the nations? Well, I think once we have this money view understanding of the history that I've been trying to explain to you, this makes a lot of sense. Why? Well, because if there's 3 different Herodian provinces ruled by different rulers, each of whom are issuing their own coins, well, the value of those coins against silver might be different for the different rulers, right? Because each of those coins is a kind of fiduciary money that's floating in the market. Its value is determined by the market. And if one ruler is spending a lot more of them into existence, so to speak, then the value of that money might fall against the silver foreign exchange. And so the different bronze coins issued by all of the 3 different regions that Herod's kingdom is broken up into might have different values. So, which doesn't seem fair, because that means that people from different places are paying different rates in order to convert their bronze money into silver money, basically depending on the value that the money changers place on them by making the market in the coins. Now, also, we have to keep in mind that the garrison in Samaria, Roman auxiliaries, are probably being paid directly in silver. So their money is actually indexed to the changes in the money, so they wouldn't be experiencing this pressure at all, right? And so that is, well, a big reason. I mean, besides just the fact that they're working for the Romans, the fact that not only are they working for the Romans, but they're being paid in silver that isn't losing value relative to the temple tax, in the same way that our bronze coins are losing value relative to the temple tax, right? So that, I think, is the meaning of this appeal to the universality of the nations in reference to the temple tax, right? So the problem is that the par value of the money in which all of the different tributaries to the temple are paying has been broken, right? The par, so it's not the money has a different value. So you all have to pay half a shekel to the temple, but what half a shekel means to you is going to be different depending on which of the local monetary economies you're in, depending on what the value of your bronze coins is. Or if you're a Samaritan, then you're kind of insulated from it because you're being paid in silver directly. And that is going to make a big difference, right? It's going to have big real distributional effects. And obviously it's obvious why that you might resent that. Now, okay, so now I want to make an observation about the fig trees, and then I want to talk about Nero, and we'll kind of come to the end of our discussion for today. So what's going on with the fig tree, right? It's weird. Before and after he cast the money changers out of the temple, Jesus demands figs from a fig tree that isn't in season. He curses it, and then he comes back, and the fig tree has withered. And then he gives his disciples this instruction about forgiving the discrepancies in payments. What's going on? Well, I think we can read this fairly obviously as a critique of the fiscal system, right? So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that the various fiscal demands, right, of the temple. So the temple is demanding a payment of tax. Well, and the temple is demanding a payment from people who don't have the money because the money has been sucked out of the economy by the credit crisis in Rome. So you're demanding something I don't have when money is not in season, and yet you're demanding it. And what is this going to do? Well, you're destroying the productive basis of the economy. Okay, this is the point. Jesus is saying, the fiscal exactions of the temple, which are becoming more and more crushing because of this monetary crisis that's raising the price of silver against bronze, is basically crushing the real economy, and it's ruining people, and so you're kind of killing the goose that lays the golden eggs, so to speak, right? I mean the fig tree could give you figs if you'd only make your demands in a more appropriate way, but your unreasonable demands are going to mean that you're going to get nothing, right? So you're demanding something when it can't be given, and what's the consequence? Well, the fig tree is going to wither, and you're going to get nothing. Now, what's the solution to this? Well, the solution to this is the forgiveness of debts. Okay, the forgiving of trespasses, i.e., discrepancies in payments. Now, this probably the error in the amount of payments has a specific meaning with regard to the money changers, right? Because really, if you have to pay a premium to the money changer to get the shekels, right? So the premium on the shekels is rising as the monetary crisis proceeds. So your payments that you make in bronze, there's an error, there's a trespass, there's a paraptoma, okay? And it's that paraptoma is the extra that you have to pay to the money changers to get the temple, okay? So what is Jesus saying? Well, he's saying, well, we can solve all of this if what? Well, if we get rid of this external monetary system and we just issue credits to each other within the circle of believers, and then it becomes easy to fix problems in the monetary economy just by forgiving debts, right? This is the point, that in a way what he's saying is none of this is necessary. If all of these problems that we have is caused by the fact that we have this externally imposed fiscal circuit, and if only, right, we could get rid of all of the foreign exchange and deal purely in credit with one another, then there would be no possible scarcity of money, right? Within the community of believers who agree to forgive one another their trespasses, there is no possible scarcity of money. And that's, well, what is that? That's the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so I hope that this has illuminated this. So I want to end on one note. So this is something that happens after Christ, okay? But it's important for the reception context of these stories, which is Nero. So let's look just briefly back here. So as you know, so we've been talking about the Tyrion Shuttle, which is this coin here, and I've been saying that this is the coin whose market price in terms of bronze is what matters for the real value of the temple contributions, okay? This coin ceased to exist after 66 AD. Basically, it ceased to be produced. Now, why? Well, because 66 is the year in which in which Nero produces his denarius. So one of the reasons that Nero has an infamous reputation is because of this debasement event. And what did he do? Well, so basically he drastically decreased. So he made the coins lighter. So in Augustus's denarius is probably 20.5 siliqui, about 3.88 grams. Nero not only lightened the denarius, but he also debased it, such that it probably contained about 16 siliqui of silver. Why this number? Well, it seems likely that Nero was observing that the Legionary Denarii of Mark Antony were continuing to circulate precisely because they were bad. So because the coins are overvalued, they're less likely to be drawn out of circulation. And so they're the last coins that are going to be hoarded as the monetary crisis proceeds and deflation sucks all of the silver coins out of the monetary economy. Okay, so the bad coins circulate. What's interesting is that these bad coins were issued by a failed contender, right, by the losing party in a civil war. So even though Antony lost the civil war, his coins are still circulating 100 years after his death. Well, this is a big problem for the theory that coins are based on the promise of the issuer to receive them back, right? Antony's dead. Nobody thinks he's taken his coins back, and yet they continue to circulate as denarii. So Nero observes this, and I suspect that he issued his coins in order to match the silver content of the circulating Antony denarii. So if the Antony denarii were worn, so they were originally issued, they should have weighed about 3.79 grams. But if they were worn to an average of 3.278, and some of the existing coins, the lightest ones, are down around 3 grams, 3.0 grams. So if they were worn to 3.278 grams, then they would have contained about 16 siliqui of silver left in them. And so I suspect this was kind of the average condition of the denarii in 66. And what does Nero do? Well, he just issues his own denarius that is going to match the silver content of the circulating coin. Why? Well, because if he doesn't do this, then he's issuing coins that are likely going to be directly removed from circulation. So debasing the coins is a way to preserve their status as money and prevent them from being hoarded, melted down, and possibly exported into the Indian Ocean system. Okay, so one of the reasons that I say that Nero got a bad rap, right? Because the problem is really Tiberius. The problem is Tiberius, who's sticking with the good money standard. He's not spending any money. He's hoarding it all up. He's doing austerity, right? He's doing sound money, and this crashes the economy. And the problem after that is really how can the Roman emperors spend enough money to keep the economy going? Okay, that's really one of the jobs of the emperor, is to cast money into circulation by spending it on war, on military works, and often by literally throwing it into the crowd at Rome. Okay, so Nero is engaging in huge building projects, right? He builds the Domus Aureus, the infamous golden palace, and he also debases the money. And what we need to understand is that debasements like this are not, as is generally received wisdom, right, are not necessarily because of the greed of the rulers. In fact, it's sort of the opposite. These debasements are necessary measures in order to prevent the contraction of the monetary economy from leading to a run on credit and sucking all the money out of circulation. Okay, which is exactly what happened in the 30s, in the early 30s. And so Nero kind of finally solves this problem by debasing the denarius, and in order to match the value of the circulating Antony denarii. And in so doing, he basically shuts down the mint at Tyre. Okay, so after this period, shekels are no longer minted in Tyre, and the reason for this is simple, which is that after Nero debases, it's a lot more attractive to ship the silver to his mint and get it minted there. You'd make more of a profit, and so basically the mint at Tyre can no longer compete with the Roman system. And so Nero, essentially, by debasing the monetary system, he unified the Roman Empire in monetary terms. So he drove out of circulation these older, kind of better silver monies, and he replaced it with a new money. And none of the other silver coins could compete, and so he kind of created a single coin that would be a standard of a monetary standard throughout the whole empire, and so he created a kind of unit of account parity, which is really going to be the topic of my book that I talked about in the very beginning of the video. Okay, so this is kind of the close of the story. What we have to keep in mind is that in the reception of, during the composition of the Gospels and in the reception of the Gospels, all of this history is in the past. Okay, so it's all after the reform of Nero, in which his coin kind of replaces the Tyrion shekel and all these other coins. And so we have to remember that when we're reading the monetary politics in the Gospels, we're reading through the destruction of the temple, through the reform of Nero in 66, and then we're looking back on events that are really centered around the reign of Tiberius and the monetary crisis of 33 AD. But in order to understand all of the politics of this, we need to begin all the way back in the 2nd century BC with the Hazmanans and all the rest of it. So, okay, so this is kind of what I figured out over the last couple of weeks looking into this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you appreciate it, please throw me some money at I've got it here. It's patreon.com/Colin Drum. Like, I'm writing a book. It's going to take me another 5 years. If you want to help feed me while I'm working on all this stuff, it's much appreciated. You also get recordings of classes that I give and various other kinds of content. Okay, so there you go. There's the money changes in the temple. I hope it all makes sense now, and I will see you again soon with some more Mediterranean monetary theory.